that I have to look up to the colonizer. Deep down inside me, I was propelled to obey the colonizer. But wait, what about the colonizer owing me? Ripped from their normal life, pushed into the unknown, ripped from their culture, ripped from their country, mother, father, sisters, brothers, even their children, ripped from being human and turned into the colonizer property, same as an animal. My ancestors watched as mothers were being raped by the colonizer. My ancestors watched as fathers were being raped by the colonizers. My ancestors were raped by the colonizer. My ancestors were not born slaves. My ancestors were turned into slaves by the colonizer. What about my bloodline being directly responsible for Holland to be one of the richest nations in the world? What about the colonizer who benefited billions and billions from my ancestors' sweat, blood, and tears? What about my ancestors who can say, no more the colonizer can say, who pays, who decides? What about the colonizer owing me billions and billions?
Thank you, Shanarda. My name is Stephanie Martin, and I welcome you all to our fourth symposium. And this morning we are going to have panel discussions, and I'm your MC, and Ms. Shanarda Ignacio is my co-MC. Give her some love. Mr. James Finis, Bonaire, an island in southern Caribbean that is lobbying to the United Nations and the world to relist Bonaire on the non-self-governing territories list of the United Nations Protective List. President of the Nosque Bonaire Back organization, Mr. James Finis. We want Bonaire Back NGO, a young, professional, commercial banker and past president of NGO platform Bonaire, abandoned his professional life and turned human rights activist full-time, where he started to lobby the Dutch government to be transparent and accountable in its governance of the people of Bonaire for the past 18 years. Mr. Finis noted what he calls the new wave of European recolonization of the Caribbean and the Americas, bribing and blackmailing our people. As part of his activism, he demonstrated in the rain and sun without leaving, sleeping outside Bonaire's governor's office in 2014 to 2015 for 8 months, demanding a referendum so that the people can choose their own future. After the dissolution of the Netherlands Antilles on the 10th of October in 2010, the people was forced to be part of Holland without equal rights. James Finis sacrificed himself for his country and the people to get a referendum in which he succeeded. On the 18th of December 2015, the government of Bonaire had no choice but to give in and hold the referendum in order for Mr. James to stop protesting and go home. In that referendum, the people of Bonaire voted overwhelmingly 65% rejecting the present illegal constitutional status of Bonaire. However, instead of respecting the wishes of a nation, Holland Parliament decided to annex and enter Bonaire and its people into the Dutch constitution with unequal rights, whilst the local politicians in the Netherlands Antilles and the world did nothing.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Santa Andres. All right. Good morning, Guiana. No French. Guiana. Good morning, Miss Lodiska. Good morning, Aruba. Good morning. Hello there, our brother. Good morning to Charles Woodley from Stacia. Good morning, and I have to be very careful with this one. I have to say Virgin Islands, US. Yes, I got it, yes. Yes, US. And finally, our brother from Puerto Rico. So I try to do that because I'm not a speaker, I'm a doer. And so I will give the mic to our the president of Nosque Bonaire back to say a few words to welcome you guys.
It's not easy. I was in the same status as normally you do things, you don't see, you don't worry, you keep going. Sometimes they tell you to sit, they tell you to sit today and watch and be part of it. So it was easy for me this morning. Okay, thank you all again to respond, to feel that there's a need to get together, to approach each other and see what we can do. And you guys responded tremendously. We know we have hope. When you see the young boys, I say, I'm okay. So when these guys, you say, and then you see the lady, they say, I'm okay, we're okay, we're okay, we have a future. They will continue, like Aruba tell us, the people who fought for Aruba, they said, if you fall, take the flag and continue to struggle. So we don't worry anymore. I feel okay. I think we should feel okay because we have the young guys here. They will continue if something happens to us. But anyway, so this morning we're here with I think with a common goal, a common struggle to seek the justice. And you know what ancestral sovereignty and learning things that every time that there's an ancestral right, ancestral justice for our people. So that's the only reason I'm here, the only reason I decided to do this. There's no other agenda. There's nothing else than this. So I don't know where it will lead us, but we'll continue the path. So tomorrow, today, I think we are here with the high spirits to get the most of this reunion, and learn about what's in here, and remember, and also I remember that say the ancestors sent us, so we're here for that, and I think that together, as I feel that it's the only way forward to get our people and get our common goals realized together. That's what we keep fostering, that we stick together and help each other, support each other in this very, very complicated world forward. This morning, I just spoke with my colleagues here, two heroes, two Bonaire heroes. This is two heroes. Thank you again, and I hope you have a wonderful time so far. And the ideas, the wishes, or the thoughts you have come here, I hope they are fulfilling, and I hope that we can get more out of it this coming days. Thank you, and have a fruitful day.
Good morning, Bonaire! Good morning! Bonaire! All right. Okay, I didn't forget, I leave it the best for last. Thank you guys.
Those are the three pillars that we are fighting for as we continue our fight and our education among our own people. My presentation today is self-governance. I call it the pursuit of the Raizals people, or so we use the term first people. I teach philosophy. I begin the class with a question, a philosophical question, so that our kids can begin thinking and questioning the topic that we are going to discuss throughout the course of the day. But there are three questions that I'm trying to answer. One is, what is self-governance or self-determination? Two, why the Raizals people see self-governance as a dream and not a reality in spite of the democratic participation they currently have under the Colombian government. How has the Raizals people been pursuing self-governance over the years? So those are the three questions that I'm going to answer. And I want you to think about this question that I'm going to propose to you now in part of the introduction. In the introduction, I have a question that I want you to think about as we strive, all of us strive to decolonize our territory and our people. This is the question that I want us to answer or to think about. Written laws or a law well written does or can it change the status or condition of a people under a colonial regime? A written law or a law well written, implemented, does or can it change the status, condition of a people under a colonial regime? I want you to think about that. Really want you to think about that. If you are under a colonial regime and you are negotiating with the colonial regime in respect to laws that they need to write for you so that they can secure your rights, is it going to change your condition? Is it going to improve your condition? Even if it's well written and even if those laws are implemented, will it eventually change your condition? So I want you to think about that. So when we are, as a people, thinking about self-determination, we need to change our ship or our mental capacity in respect of how we are negotiating with the colonial regime. So you can write that question down or think about it. If we will have a time to talk about it, I would love for us to discuss that question. And then I want to say this in light of a quote that I love from one of my favorite authors, W.E.B. Du Bois. He said, every law that has ever been written, this is the concept that I want to push through my presentation. Every law that has ever been written to ensure the rights of the Raizals people by the state of Colombia has been done with a hidden agenda to keep the people in a state of false ideal or in prison. As W.E.B. Du Bois said or argues, a true and a worthy ideal frees and uplifts a people. A false ideal imprisons and lowers the people. So I want you to think about these things. So let's proceed with the first question. What is self-governance or self-determination? So I will not give you a direct answer, but I'll give you an answer from different experts, from what I've read and what I've heard from them. Let's begin with one of the universal laws that we have. Definition of what self-determination or self-governing or governance mean. The Declaration regarding non-self-governing territory on the UN Charter, Chapter 11 and Articles 73.A and point B. It says, members, I'm not sure if you can see this, is very small. Members of the United Nations which have or assume responsibilities for the administrations of territories whose peoples have not yet attained a full measure of self-government, recognize of the principle that the interests of the inhabitants of these territories, listen to this word, are paramount, and accept as a sacred trust the obligation to promote to the utmost within the system of international peace and security established by present charters or charter, the well-being of the inhabitants of these territories, and to this end, to ensure with due respect for the culture of the peoples concerned, their political, economic, social, and educational advancement, their just treatment, and the protection against abuses. So the point here, in the general overview or description or definition of what self-governing is that the colonial regime has the responsibility upon agreeing on this charter to ensure that peoples that are, or territories that are non-self-governing should be able to work with them according to their political ideas and views to ensure that their economic, political, social, and educational advancement is being protected and working through. So we need to exact that from the colonial regime. We are not asking them, or we are not begging them, or we are not lobbying for them to give us that. They agreed upon that with international laws and international agreements. So it's not embarrassing to exact that from them. B, to develop self-government to take due account of the political aspirations of the peoples and to assist them in the progressive not make for them, assist them in the progressive development of their free political status according to the particular circumstances of each territory and its peoples and the varying stages of advancement. Particular circumstances. In other words, they need to keep in context the people's reality and the way how the people see life. Okay? So they cannot go over and establish or impose something on the people. The people need to born from the people. Harold Rodriguez is an activist, a social activist. He's an engineer from our island, and he's been in the struggle for quite a while now with the MNSD and other different movements. And he gave a definition in 2005 of what self-determination is all about. He said, the right of self-determination is a prerequisite. That would mean a requirement, a condition to enjoy your other rights. In other words, we cannot enjoy any other rights that is available for us until self-determination or self-government is ensured to the people. Like in this case, our economic and political rights. In other words, what he's trying to help us to understand, if we do not have, or we are not practicing self-determination, or it is not ensured by the colonial regime, eventually we cannot talk about having our own rights or our own political or economic rights, because we are still under our representation structure. So we need to keep that also in mind.
First of all, on behalf of the Guyanese Human Rights Organization, I would like to warmly thank the President Pines, Bonaire Puerto Foundation, and President Davica, the We Dare Too Foundation, for their kind invitation to this very encouraging initiative, as it is a tremendous worldwide freedom call. As our friend, lady poet, said, our ancestors are watching us. Given the Native American question that's been totally crossed out, and the slave trade that populated the Americas, the awareness of our fundamental rights was directly transmitted to us by the resistance of the Great Amerindian struggle and the Maroon Age. Thus, in our day, Guyana owes to its indigenous people much of its activists' vitality to repel the multi-scalar permanent assaults of the French assimilation barbarity. Its central power continuously trying to destroy our composite plurinationality since the 1946 legalizing colonization law. More than 4 centuries of subjection of French peasants who owns the land and to whom belongs the right, without us being able to obtain the smallest part of the 35,000 square miles private domain of the state. France has never given us access to land, yet suffered from the blood spill of its original peoples and or the uprooting of the former country for Afro-Ascendant heirs. The denial of Guyanese identity is politically programmed under all successive metropolitan governments. You can have colonialism by pouring money in the territory, giving it a not neglectable democracy, but above all, you get the state contempt. To respond to the question of the reparations in Guyana against the French judicial system today, The Guyanese International Movement for Reparation, the Mayor of Guyana, reminds us that the question of reparations comes from the point of view of inheritance. The problem is that this legacy of values owned by our ancestors is today, the problem of this is that the legacy of our values owned by our ancestors, is today put at the service of the French colonialist state. This heritage presents itself, on the one hand, under the falsification of history. In order to dominate people, it is necessary to deprive it of its history, and consequently the Guyanese, or the inhabitants of Guyana, the persons of African ancestors, are deprived of their history and are lodged at the rank of those who have no history. The second aspect of the heritage issue is the aspect of economic inheritance. When you are dispossessed of your land because you're suffering deportation, you were on land in Africa. This land disposition continues for the land developed by our ancestors and which allowed the enrichment of Europe. It's all about these possessions with colonial legitimacy in Guyana. The third aspect is the theory of confrontation that is developed, according to which the Guyanese people are confused with the French people, and that, therefore, if we are confused, there is no repair that would become legitimate. But the realities are that the Guyanese people evolved in Guyana on totally different levels than those of European and French nationals. Because we should demonstrate our humanity while they have this humanity quite naturally. Because they have all the directorial position of the state administration, in the country, etc. It is they who manage everything. If we refer to the positive responses to reparations by the Caribbean countries, these answers are mainly related to the fact that these countries are independent countries. While in Guyana, it is difficult to accept that French justice, the justice of a Western state, can recognize the right to reparations because we are located on the French plain, which is negation of our identity. The question of reparation is consubstantial, intrinsic with decolonization, the decolonization question, and the access of the Guyanese people to its sovereignty. So today, the question is clearly raised, particularly in Martinique and Guadeloupe. In French Guyana, in legal terms, there is still no referral to French court on this issue, because it's a matter of activist means that must be given so as to find lawyers who are able to be in conflict with the state, because it's also about being committed lawyers. Even more broadly, where the Guyanese attorney stops to not end in prison, that's where begins the combat of law against the vigor of French foreign law without rights or title in Guyana. If in Martinique and Guadeloupe the legal confrontation with the state has already taken place, it is because Martinique and Guadeloupe have activist lawyers who are able to enter into direct conflict with the French state. This is not only said in Guyana, but the question is clearly not yet resolved. However, as a recent example of restorative justice, we note that during this summer in Great Britain, the Scottish Glasgow University will pay the University of West Indies £20 million to found a joint center for development research as reparations to buy back its historical ties to the transatlantic slave trade. The Guyanese human rights organization appeals to the political courage and historical dignity of all local elected representatives, present and future, of the territorial collectivity of Guyana, and to the Guyanese parliamentaries in Paris to intercede with the United Nations to assert our inalienable right to self-determination as expressed in the Projet Guiana, defended by the people through the Guyanese Front for its territorial change.
And I wanted to start with what is our tradition in the Virgin Islands, as well as in other parts of the Caribbean Americas, with an enunciation of a conch shell horn, right? And in this particular picture, which is in the waters that are still under a lot of attack in the Virgin Islands, you're going to notice that our daughter Anuma is playing not only a Pacific Island poop that was given to her by a chief, Brother Kalani, but she's also wearing an ankh that represents eternal life. And that's all it is. It's a symbol of eternal life, that you're responsible for life and respect for life. And she also has in her left hand a traditional conch shell horn that is blown as we open for any traditional activity. I did not bring one because the one I had was taken from me by TSA. I just want to highlight that, so I have to pack differently next time. So we speak of an enunciation. So this is what we do in order to have traditional activities. We don't use culture for the sake of just art for art. We use cultural heritage to be able to do with empowerment, to speak of our ancestral sovereignty, to ensure that we have power from a spiritual place first, so that we can do it a little more easily, and we can tolerate things with a little more strength in a physical space. So we have traditional gatherings in the Virgin Islands by the same waters where many of our ancestors were brought in, so that we can atone for that. And we do these things by any fort, by any enslavement quarters, by any burial ground, to make sure that we recognize the spiritual strength and harmony and respect that's due for our people in these respective areas. I usually go through a piece around what they refer to as the roots of revolution, but I want to highlight a particular part. How should we remind the people hypnotized by death? So when we keep having this conversation of why the colonizer does this and why the Dutch does that, or the French does this, or the Spanish does that, or the British does this, or the Germans do that, or the Danish do this, do you see where we're going? We're talking about an entity that appears to be human, that operates in a very inhumane construct. So it's very important that we understand who we're dealing with and what we're dealing with when we speak of these things of decolonization, self-determination, liberation, and unification, because it comes from a space of ancestral, sovereign power. Really important that we recognize that, yeah. And so when we speak of how should we remind the people hypnotized by death, and the quote continues on, that we are to remember this: against all that destruction, some yet remain among us unforgetful of origins, dreaming secret dreams, seeing secret visions, even hearing secret voices of our purpose. So we have to leave those killers and those predators to themselves. If we keep giving them the power and presence, and even in calling them, we're giving them power. And we're giving them authority over our ancestral sovereign power. So it's not that you ignore them, but I think this morning, I said that to someone. It's not that I don't see the enemy, it's that I choose to see my friends and my family first. And I'm spending so much energy on my family and friends first that I don't spend a lot of time invoking that energy, because it puts you in a warfare zone. Yeah. Not to say that you're not to be a warrior, because we're freedom fighters, we're warriors, and yes, we fight. The level of our fight now has changed significantly. So I just want to kind of share with you, what you're seeing on the side is we do this work in all of our schools, private, parochial, public. I tend to do it by invitation, but sometimes I just roll into the school and just, what class you teaching today? Physics? Cool. Let me look on my Google. What could I teach about physics? Great. Can I come in your class? With permission. You understand? So that we can give the children an opportunity, and the teacher, to hear these conversations about ancestral sovereign power, to hear these conversations about how important it is for us to decolonize from here. From here. Because we're decolonized in a certain sense. We have certain benefits. Most people have running water. Most people have current, well, what you just said some of the time. Well, I'm just saying, this is important that we recognize these types of things, because we're coming from a space that's very different. So I wanted to use a quotation from a native. I want to identify that Sister Queen Caroline A. Brown identifies as a native, indigenous, free, self-determined Virgin Islander. She's got like 7, 8 generations deep. Whole family line she could pick up in paper back to the 1700s. So we're talking from when the French governed over St. Croix. I just want to highlight that, yeah? if we are truly set on rebuilding the Virgin Islands of the United States, which is our legal name, that's why we say we, I, us, then we must re-examine those systems that have not been in our best collective interests. We must begin from a position of honesty, integrity, sacred intent, and balance. Aye, ya, ye. We have names. The indigenous people called St. Croix, I. People called Yayi for St. Thomas. They had names. It wasn't just St. John and St. Croix and St. Thomas. They had actual ancestral names. Yeah? We are soul survivors and a resilient people going through apocalyptic events. It is accountability time and time for inner work as well as collective growth. We made it through 2 storms that increased from a category 1 to a 5 in less than 24 hours. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. There is nothing to fear but fear itself. Let's go. We have much to accomplish. I just wanted to highlight that because this is a system that served in the U.S. military, did all types of stuff, was damaged while in the U.S. military, is defined as being disabled. I call her a person with special gifts, all right? Right, but she has been a freedom fighter from birth. She comes from a long line of freedom fighters in the Virgin Islands, and we need to acknowledge them. So usually in the U.S. territory, it is illegal to do this. It is illegal to have the U.S. flag waving at the same height as the Danish flag and the VI flag. In America, this could be considered treason. So I thought it was really powerful when I saw this in front of Government House of the Virgin Islands. I said, I want this picture. Because this is probably the closest to self-determination we're going to get for a minute. Because persons don't know that law. That in the United States of America, whatever they govern and own, you cannot have any other flag wave above theirs. However, this is what exists in front of Government House. I don't think they know, but you see what I'm saying, how the power of spirit operates? Okay. In the National Museum of African American History and Culture, fabulous space. If you do get an opportunity to go to Washington, D.C., that's one of the few things that's a benefit to go for. When you look inside, they have like a list of all of the enslavers and how many Africans and indigenous persons and serfs, European serfs, that they brought over. Their numbers are very small. They're not accurate, but it's okay because at least it's a nice picture and it looked pretty. They said from 1649 to 1802, 85,000 African captives were transported. But we know it was well over 250,000.
Yeah.
But I say this to say, if we don't do the research, if we don't get involved in this academic engagement to be able to tell our narrative from us first, then this will continue. Yeah. I show this picture, this is what I call it the starting with diplomacy slide. Because persons tend to think, because we talk about decolonization and self-determination, that we just hate all white people. So I want it on the record. I don't hate people based on complexion. You treat me with love and respect, you're gonna get it back. You don't treat me with love and respect, then you're gonna get fired. Just fire. That's what I know. You understand? And I do it with, I smile, I'm pleasant. However, I wanted to show that we have done exchange programs with the Danish government. So we have our students, and I want to highlight that these young people here, and you probably, for those people that like to make judgment, right? This one, all of them had dropped out of school. And we went into the community, and we pulled them up. Fine, you don't want to go high school, you don't want to get in any more fights, you don't want to be a juvenile delinquent, I got that. Tell me the school you want to master. You don't like regular school because you don't want to sit in your chair all day while the teacher talk, and you don't do nothing? Fine, tell me the school you want. So we started to create these vocational programs so that they can learn masonry, they can learn construction, not only construction with hand, but they understood management. They understood appraisal work with real estate, etc., and entrepreneurship. And I want to highlight that those young men and the 2 young girls, did you see that? Ended up doing an exchange program for several months in Denmark and came back with credentials, certifications, and completed their secondary studies. Why? Because we made sure that the program, we taught them the regular reading, writing, mathematics, etc., right? But we gave them a self-determined construct. Because I explained to them, you cannot go into Denmark and act stupid. Stupid, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yes.
You have to go with some skills, and you need to understand how they're gonna see you.
Yes.
Because they already think you're black and you're this and you're that and you're this and you're that. So you need to go there with some skill. And that alone shifted the trajectory of how they began to deal with things. We also are involved with the International Day of the World's Indigenous People every year. We've changed policies inside of the legislature of the Virgin Islands, sometimes a little bit by force. Because you know, when you come to legislature with persons that dress like this sister right here is born and bred in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. And she did her own family DNA research to find out how many generations of Taino ancestry are part of her lineage. When she came to legislature with her 12 children, I want to make sure we highlight this, 12, and she's younger than me, just want to highlight that. And her husband in tow, I want to make sure it was our family. They started an organization called Opia Taino. I encourage persons to look for opiataino.com because you will get a chance to again see what people do when they want recognition, justice, and development in their own home, right? And even though they're challenged with the US government recognizing them as indigenous people, because America only feels indigenous people, they said they're all dead. And then these people come in the room, like really in the room, with DNA research. So I just want to highlight some of the things that have been going on in terms of our preparation. This is another site. This is a site I was mentioning in previous gatherings. APHJ2SD.com. It stands for People's Historical Journey to Self-Determination and Decolonization. It brought together many Virgin Islanders and persons from the wider breadth of the Caribbean Americas to actually share information. That's where you can post whatever it is that you're doing that's about decolonization, self-determination, independence, freedom, your protests, your booklet, whatever. Send it to, and they will post it. And it has a very wide reach around the world. Yeah? And this is something that's done. No one even wanted to give the names of who's the administrator for obvious reasons. Yeah? But I just want to kind of highlight that. We also do culture. When you see Che, we're not speaking, you know, it kind of connects to Che Guevara, but we're speaking of culture, heritage, education, right? And we encourage that and we integrate that because then instead of you coming in persons thinking it's only political, well, we're only doing cultural heritage education. We're trying to encourage the students to really know about themselves and to feel good and to love themselves. Do you understand? So we're not trying to politicize everything. We're trying to make it so that the children and their parents and the elders can actually have pragmatic solutions for how we nurture our environments, how we heal traumatized people. What we have experienced, all the things we heard this morning, we have been traumatized. Under any other circumstance, people would say we were schizophrenic and we were crazy. Literally. Because this is trauma. And trauma is supposed to be treated. And trauma is supposed to be treated with rehabilitation and resources. I want to make sure I highlight that word. Resources that are sustainable. It is not supposed to be that we're going to rape you, lynch you, rape you more, lynch you, take your land, miseducate you, take away all of your authority and your power, strip you of your spiritual foundation, and then expect you to be normal and walk straight. That's insane. Right, okay, yes, keep going. So one of the projects that we started doing, and this is where we were able to start with something inside of the US, use their money very strategically to do with the Slave Wrecks Project. And there was a lot of conversation because this project used to be called the African Slave Wrecks Project. And persons that were providing funding were scared of the term Africa. So it shifted to, and I can say that publicly, and it shifted to Slave Wrecks Project. And then there was been a conversation on why are we referring to persons that are human only as slaves, when women do not give birth to slaves. Yeah, women give birth to children, and those children go through a process that creates that enslavement. So we're having some issues with the name. I don't think they'll change it, it's fine, it's their money. However, what we've been able to do is to take this project from outside of the US with the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of African American History and Culture, and the other PI, principal investigator, is the George Washington University, but we've expanded it to Mozambique. right? So we've expanded it to Senegal. We've expanded it to South Africa with the Ezekiel Museums in South Africa, with the Modlane University in Mozambique, right? With the Sheikh Anta Diop Institute in Senegal, with the University of the Virgin Islands through the Virgin Islands Caribbean Cultural Center. So with a very quiet space in St. Croix, because we're only 84 square miles in St. Croix, 32 square miles in St. Thomas, 19 square miles in St. John. And our population has shifted significantly through disaster capitalism created through these very horrific hurricanes from Maria. But we were having capitalism disaster before the hurricane, right? Because, as I have been saying, when you buy land for $25 million in gold, you feel like you own it. Well, I guess you do to some people. But how do you buy land for $25 million in gold and the inhabitants that look like Africans, that are African ascended people, you didn't give them any conversation, no involvement, no input, no participation. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. To the point that now, even when we have conversations and have attempted to have constitutions, we're one of those non-incorporated, non-self-governing territories in the United States of America, what's the real word, colony, that has not been able to have a constitution. So we're still using a revised Organic Act from 1954. And so we have a whole piece that we use from Dr. Asa Hilliard. If you're not familiar, he too is an ancestor, one of the esteemed educators in the world, not just because he come out of America, I want to make sure I highlight that, but because he studied in different parts of the world to be able to have a paradigm, an actual framework for how we are to teach our children, how we are to teach our educators, and how we are to teach our parents to be able to help our children and our educators for appropriate, what they call appreciative learning, etc. So this just kind of gets into this piece of the different apprenticeships, the way that we change our relationships. And essentially, the self-determination restores humanity when we do the learning appropriately. It embraces best practices. People love to use that term, best practices. And then I ask, what are best practices? What is that? Best practices are supposed to be things that work, not things that fail. If our children are still illiterate, then there's a problem. If our children do not know about their African, indigenous, ancestral soul self, something is wrong. That means you're only getting 20% of your history and your understanding of self. And you can't offer, 20% is failing, right? 20% out of 100 is failing. Okay, just make.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It is my great honor to be given the opportunity by the Bonaire Back Foundation, Fundación Muscat Bonaire Back, to address you this morning on the all-important subject of self-determination. I hope that I will be able to contribute in a small way in providing insights on how Aruba dealt with the issue as a tool to help us, as the program states, examine the strategies and maybe come up with viable solutions. In my personal view, self-determination is an inalienable right of a people to determine its own destiny, its own political status, as well as its own form of economic, cultural, and social development. It is the goal of basically every foreign colony anywhere in the world, the Caribbean region being no exception, to exercise the control over their own destiny as a nation, as stated in the United Nations Charter when it was signed on the 26th of June 1945 in San Francisco and came into force on the 24th of October 1945, initiating its transformation into a legal right under international law. All people have the right to self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. Paramount to the idea of self-determination is the principle of freedom. I take it further. Rather than a principle, freedom is the most fundamental right of any human being to live his or her life as he or she chooses. In terms of nations, it is the right of all people to take charge of their political, economic, and cultural destinies. They establish their own authority, always within the contours of universal respect for the same rights of others. That authority ought to be supported and respected by others. Not being allowed to make that choice by other people or nations comes down to infringement of that right to freedom and basically incorporation in a single political entity regardless of the wishes of the people being denied their right to choose. The post-World War II political era has highlighted the great divide between self-governing and non-self-governing countries and territories, with the former being forced by the international community, led by the United Nations, to make amends toward their former respective colonies. Chapter 11 of the United States Charter, the Declaration regarding non-self-governing territories, stipulated that member states of the United Nations administering territories which have not yet attained self-government recognize that the interests of the inhabitants of these territories are paramount. Again, like my friend and brother says from San Andre. So, the paramount and accept as a sacred trust the obligation to promote the territory's well-being. The well-being of these territories entails providing them with the ways and means to achieve political, economic, social, and educational advancement of the inhabitants of these territories. The member states of the United Nations who were administering such territories had to commit themselves to actively assist their respective territories in the development, self-government, and democratic political institutions, taking into consideration each territory's level of development and the will of their people. The member states committed themselves to report regularly to the Secretary General of the United Nations on the strides made economically, socially, and educationally in the territories under their administration. In 1946, 8 member states, including the Netherlands, administrated 72 territories to be considered non-self-government. However, promising the commitment to reporting back to the United Nations General Assembly might have been a noble one, but not much came of it as many members unilaterally discontinued reporting. The decolonization process continued at a rapid pace. From 1960 to 2002, 54 territories attained self-government. In 1954, our own kingdom of the Netherlands consisted of the Netherlands, Suriname, and the Netherlands Antilles, consisting of 6 islands: Aruba, Bonaire, Curaçao, Saint Martin, Saint Eustatius, and Saba. This was established in the Charter for the Kingdom, which became effective that same year. Suriname was given a larger portion of self-governance and allowed to care of its own national interests. One of those interests became gaining independence. By 1975, the kingdom underwent change in its constellation when Suriname opted to make use of its right of self-determination and achieve independence on the 25th of November 1975. Because of the entering into force of the Charter for the Kingdom, the independence of Suriname, and the introduction of the island regulation of the Netherlands Antilles, what we call the Eilandregeling, on the 3rd of March 1951, the United Nations deemed to the process of decolonization finalized as far as the Netherlands was concerned. For the island of Aruba, the struggle to establish its own identity was a real one and will not go away anytime soon, as the Arubians were not content with the arranged Netherlands until once Suriname gained its independence. Two camps will form. One in favor of a more federal political relation with the Netherlands, and the other camp pursued the idea of a separate status within the Kingdom of the Netherlands. A new political leader, the now deceased Gilberto François Petit Cruz, a liberator, backed by this political party Movimiento Unidad del Pueblo, the MEP of which I am a member, won the elections held and pursued greater autonomy for the island, with the ultimate goal being gaining independence, just like Suriname. To that end, Aruba politicians visit neighboring countries such as Venezuela, gathering international support for their cause of achieving a separate status within the Dutch kingdom. These visits caused friction between Aruba and the Netherlands, because the last mentioned considered these visits as an infringement on the agreement that foreign affairs pertain to the kingdom and were not insular affairs. The MEP party achieved 13 of the 21 parliamentary seats available during the election of 1975 and continued pursuing a separate status for Aruba within the kingdom. The Dutch government was reluctant to discuss this any further. This prompted Petit Cruz to announce that he would proclaim the Aruba independence unilaterally per March 1981. To that end, a national anthem and flag were introduced during a manifestation held on 18th of March 1976. This is very important for us. They just said, I think, Martin, right? The union, you have to be unified. And the Petit Cruz comes with the flag and the icon, because the people have to be united for one cause. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to get this separate status. So that was very important for us, 18th of March 1976. This was followed up by a referendum held on the 25th of March 1977, where the population will have to vote for independence or an Italian federation. The separate status within the kingdom was not put forward as an alternative because legally the right to self-determination could only lead to independence. Any other construction such as the separate status within the kingdom had to be negotiated within the contours of the kingdom itself. The result of the referendum surprised everyone. An overwhelming majority of votes cast were in favor of independence.